So YouTube, let's get this thing going. We want to use our bodies to learn new skills and then we want to improve them, right? We basically want to improve our shots at the table, and motor learning is the research field about how we learn to use our bodies to perform skills. And the research field has quite a lot to say about how we should design practices and exercises, and how we should give feedback and what we should pay attention to while we're practicing and other things too. And I think we should leverage this knowledge. So what I want to do is provide a foundation of my understanding of the research field, and from there get to the really fun part, which is being creative and showing exercises that I love. So hang in there, stick with me through these clips that might not be as snappy as scrolling through TikTok or Instagram, but in my opinion these are super interesting topics, and I hope you'll find it interesting too. And the reason that I'll explain the theory before I show you how it can look in practice is of course that the exercises will make more sense to you afterwards. When I started reading about motor learning, I was a bit confused. There were new ideas and concepts, and some were hard to grasp and some seemed to be in conflict with each other, and then I came to understand that there is a split between two different views in the field of motor learning. And these two approaches, they differ fundamentally in how they see organisms functioning and how we learn skills. One approach is the information processing theory, with the dominant underlying theory being general motor programs developed by Richard Schmidt. He first introduced the concept of general motor programs in 1975, and the other approach, which can be described as more modern, combines ecological psychology and dynamical systems theory. This approach is partially based on the Russian psychologist Nikolai Bernstein's ideas of coordination and movement. Over the past few decades, the theory of general motor programs and information processing theory have been dominant in various sports, and including table tennis, I would say. Even though my impression is that many coaches don't think about their coaching methods in explicit terms like this. According to information processing theory and the theory of general motor programs, we store constructed motor programs in the long-term memory. These motor programs can be retrieved from memory and be repeated. Early theories of motor programs, before Richard Schmidt came up with the theory of general motor programs, had limitations, specifically two problems known as the novelty problem and the storage problem. One limitation was that they couldn't explain how new and flexible movement patterns emerge if all movements were retrieved from memory. For example, in table tennis, the ball will always come to you in a new way, even if the differences are small sometimes. You play from different positions and with different spins, and sometimes you have to perform a shot that you've never done before. So how does a new movement emerge? This is the novelty problem. Since there are countless of variations of a movement, and if all these had to be stored in long-term memory, it creates a storage problem. These issues led researchers to seek alternative ways to understand motor control, and the theory of general motor programs emerged and provided explanations for these problems. The explanation is that we store general movement patterns where we can modify parameters such as time and range. In information processing theory, the brain plays a crucial role. Our brains receive sensory information from the environment, which undergoes an internal mental process where we process the information and make assessments about the environment. Then we use our stored general motor programs, adjust these parameters based on the sensory information that we receive, and then send commands to the body's muscles and joints on how to perform the movements. According to the theory of general motor programs, learning goes through three stages. The first is the verbal cognitive stage, which is where we try to understand what we need to do and use instructions and exchange knowledge to create understanding. The second stage is the motor stage, where movements become more efficient and we develop motor programs to solve situations. The third stage is the automated stage, where we no longer need to think to perform movements. At this stage, we become more receptive to external information, such as the opponent's position, and we can adjust our movements accordingly. Okay, so dynamical systems theory differs from information processing on basically every point. For example, dynamical systems theory assumes that our perception is direct. which means that our environment gives us the information we need, and there's no need for a complex internal mental process to evaluate the environment, because the information is simply sufficient. Another important pillar in dynamical systems is self-organization, which means that direct instructions don't come from the brain, but we will rather adapt our movements based on the conditions from the environment, the task, and us as an individual. There are no stored recipes in the brain on how exactly to perform movements. Rather, all individuals have their own so-called attractor states, which are stable patterns that emerge as a result of the interactions between the environment, task, and the individual. These attractor states explain why each athlete has a unique movement style that is consistently similar. Development, according to dynamical systems theory, refers to improving an individual's ability to solve problems and perform new movements by adapting to the constraints of the task, environment, and individual characteristics. Dynamical systems emphasize adaptability to changing conditions, whereas general motor programs theory is more focused on the adjustability of the learned motor programs. According to dynamical systems, the central nervous system, mainly the brain, gets more credit than it deserves. According to dynamical systems, the central nervous system has a role in determining the goal of the movement, but how it happens is largely self-organized by the peripheral nervous system. Yeah, the body's limbs and muscles, joints, and so on. So explicit instructions on how to move are therefore not effective. Instead, dynamical systems theory emphasizes the self-organization of the body's various parts. Preachers of dynamical systems say that the coach should be seen more as a guide rather than an instructor, trying to bring out effective behaviors and movement patterns. And one way to do this is by using something called the constraints-led approach, or CLA. This involves changing one of these three conditions: the individual, the task, or the environment. And this can be done in many ways. For example, you might raise the net to encourage certain behavior, like playing with more topspin, or you can implement certain rules to the game so that players are more likely to take certain actions. For example, give 1 extra point if you hit a winner after your serve. And yeah, these were just some really simple examples, and I'll dig deeper into this topic in the future. Theoretically, these two approaches are very different, but in practical terms, there are at least some differences in the type of training that they recommend, and increasing variation in practice being one. Anyway, this was an introduction to motor learning, and there's so much more in the field, and stay tuned, and I hope to see you in the next clip.